San Francisco, 1880 blank. I am so looking forward to seeing my dear Emily at last, now she is grown, a woman, although I'm sure I will hardly recognize her. She must not be proud, as if she could be, but will remember her friends, I know, and have patience with her dear Will, who cannot help but remember the girl she was, and the sweet influence she had in her old home. I talk to your father about you every day, dear, and he longs to see you as I do. Think, a learned lady in our circle. But I know you have not changed.
So this is weird. So in case we sound weird or off, different?
I'm still confused as to how you're going to make this work when both of our mics are recording both of us.
I'm still confused as to how we're going to make this work when this is a short story that we are both a little befuddled by.
Yeah.
And it's been a long time since we've talked. Not to each other. To you. The
listeners, all 0 of them.
The audience, the 1 or 2 people who tune in every few weeks or months or half a year sometimes.
Yeah.
To hear what we have to say about the wonders and mysteries of the...
We'll watch that movie one day.
We will watch a movie one day. But for now, we're not watching nothing.
No.
We are reading literature.
Mm-hmm.
And why? Why are we reading literature?
Because we want to.
Well, because we are doing what? Going through the...
Dark Descent.
By...
A lot of people.
David G. Hartwell.
It's compiled by David G. Hartwell.
He's the editor boy.
Mm-hmm.
But he has put together this collection of 3 books that make one book.
Yep.
And those 3 books are each made up of some novellas, novels, novelettes.
And short stories.
And short stories.
Mostly short stories.
Right. Some novelettes.
Mm-hmm.
The novellas don't come until his next collection, really.
Yeah.
But this, okay, but it's called The Doctor Said, but wait a minute. The show is called It's Del Toro Time. What's going on?
We get to choose what we do.
Yes.
It's our choice.
Right. Free country.
Yep.
Free pizza for all.
Nope.
Sometimes you get free pizza.
We just got a free pizza.
If Domino's screws up your order, apparently they'll just give you free pizzas.
Yep.
Yeah, so go to Domino's and order something complicated.
There you go.
And you'll maybe get a free pizza. No, it's free world.
Mm-hmm.
It's free world, baby.
And we get to choose what we want to do, and this is what we want to do.
What we want to do is we're covering the short stories of The Dark Descent by David G. Hartwell. We've done a ton of stories so far.
Mm-hmm.
We are in the 2nd book of the collection, The Medusa in the Shield.
Which is psychological horror.
Right, dark reflections of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we are on the short story...
Dear Emily.
My Dear Emily.
My Dear Emily.
Not Dear Emily. There's actually short stories and novels called Dear Emily, and it really confused me when I was trying to find this short story. Then I was like, oh, wait, it's My Dear Emily by the unparalleled, controversial, feminist, lesbian writer Joanna Russ.
Yep.
What do you know about Russ? Oh, wait, first,
An intro.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Willow.
And it's Del Toro time. It's Del Toro time.
Woo!
Yeah, there you go. It's Del Toro time. And what do you know about Joanna Russ?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Except for what you just said.
Do you know what I discovered about Joanna Russ?
What?
Too much. Because, oh boy, if you want a writer that about everyone is written about, it's Joanna Russ. There was not just 2 years ago. She died so she was born in 1937. She died at the age of 74 in 2011. But just 2 years ago, there was an article about her in the New York Times. Apropos of almost nothing. There was they were like, we just want to write about Joanna Russ again. Like, someone was thinking about her. Super controversial. Just in the sense that she was a feminist science fiction writer in a time when being a feminist science fiction writer meant that nobody liked you, including other feminist science fiction writers. Because... boy, oh boy, if there was a group that people knew how to pit against each other, it was feminists in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. Mm-hmm. She apparently had an ongoing thing with Ursula K. Le Guin, because they both represented different types of feminism, whereas Le Guin was like, women are capable of doing anything men are capable of doing, even better. Joanna Russ was like, women shouldn't try to be doing anything that men are doing. We need to recreate the world from the ground up. And there was apparently they butted heads at a conference about a panel in like the 70s about women in science fiction that, not surprisingly, had, I think, more men on it than women.
Yep.
And but this is back when, like, if you were a feminist, like, you were just labeled like a man hater.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if you wrote a book that was like, I'm envisioning a world in which women aren't completely subjugated by men, and men would be like, why do you hate the men so much? Why don't you let us just live our lives, please? It's a good thing that nobody does that anymore.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's a good thing that nobody gets very upset when anyone suggests that maybe white, cis, straight men shouldn't have the first and last word in everything.
Yep.
Barbie movie. So in any case, Joanna Russ, she was born in 1937 in New York City. She was ridiculously smart. I think she started college at the age of 15.
Nice.
Like, she was super smart. She was an artist and a playwright, an illustrator. She tried to do theater for a long time, for 3 years. She just couldn't get the hang of it. So she was like, screw it. I tried my hand at plays. I can't figure them out. Even though people were like, you're really good. She's like, I'm not good enough. She was Jewish. She had mixed feelings about her parentage. This was interesting that I read about her. She, Jewish, especially early 20th century, the roles of women and men in Jewish domestic life were very different from the perceived roles of women and men in general American life. And women were expected to be homemakers, but like very strong, very forceful, like physically and mentally and emotionally, the strong ones in the house. Whereas the men were, the masculinity in Jewish circles at the time was intellectual and creative and artistic. And the men were supposed to have the time and the freedom to do all that stuff, while the women did the manual labor and raised the kids and kept the house, which was very different than what was expected of men and women in,
Mm-hmm.
And so not only was Joanna Russ fighting the expected roles, the gender roles for her to play in just American society in general and be Miss Susie Homemaker, she was also fighting the gender roles that her parents were enforcing on her. She had a lot of problems with her parents too. Apparently her father, a lot of mental health, I guess.
Yeah.
Something we've seen quite a bit as we've gone through all this.
Yes.
She studied under Vladimir Nabokov. So Nabokov was one of her instructors at Cornell University. She got an MFA from the Yale Drama School. She got married for a while. Like she tried to do the straight white woman thing for a while, but then she was like, no, I'm a lesbian Jewish feminist.
Yep.
And she started writing and publishing works in the late 50s, but really things picked up in the 1960s.
Mm-hmm. And
the story we are covering today is one of her earliest short stories, but it's also one that people, when they look back at her writing, are like, oh, this is kind of where she started becoming Joanna Russ. Not quite, but a lot of her very elliptical dialogue and confusing pronoun usage, and I'm not going to explain anything to you. I'm just dropping you into the middle of this. I'm going to tell you this story. And I actually was reading a few essays by commentators, and one of them said that they can't read her novels very well because the stuff that makes her writing so fascinating in short stories becomes just exhausting trying to parse in a novel.
If this story had been any longer than it was, I don't think I would have been able to get through it.
Yeah. Well, I had trouble starting it, and I didn't realize until I was reading about it that it's because I couldn't track who she was talking about half the time in the beginning. Once you get into it, it's fairly obvious what's happening, but because you start off with Emily and Charlotte on
a train,
but then the next scene, it's immediately someone waking up in a coffin.
Yep.
And you're like, I guess this is a vampire. And then it just cuts to another scene. Just boom. There's no setup. There's no transitions between scenes. You're just expected to catch up, which is part of the style. That's what she's going for.
I had a really hard time distinguishing the dialogue between Charlotte and Emily. I know that Emily was supposed to be much smarter than Charlotte was. They sounded exactly the same to me.
I think you really had to stick with, I think what Joanna Russ expects the reader to do is learn a lot about the characters from the way the other characters talk about them, but the other characters talk about them also very obliquely. So you're also expected to decipher, okay, this guy, her fiance talks about her this way, but her fiance would be expecting her to behave this way. So he is talking about her in a way that he presumes her to be, and we're supposed to decipher from that she is not that way.
I don't feel like the fiance added anything to this story.
I think that's important. Yeah. I think it's important he is a nothing of a character.
If he had been gone, nothing would have changed.
I think the idea is that she is engaged, like, to a nothing, to a nobody, to someone who is well, here's the plot.
Here we go.
Charlotte and Emily are best friends, bosom friends.
Bosom friends.
They are bosom friends, as it keeps telling us that. They're not sisters, but they may as well be.
Yeah.
They are coming back from studying
somewhere.
Studying at a private school somewhere. But coming back to San Francisco.
Charlotte is... It's really hard to tell if Charlotte is joking about being happy about the proposal or not.
Oh, her friend?
Yeah.
I think she's unhappy. What I got was that, like, Emily is engaged to this guy named Will, Sweet Will, who is not a character.
Not at all.
He's in the story, but he's not a character. She's engaged to be married to Sweet Will. She finds herself uncontrollably bursting into tears at times.
Yeah, and I couldn't tell if Charlotte was, like, before that happens, because Charlotte says something, like, at least you have a guy who wants to marry you. But I can't tell if she's joking when she says that or not.
I think it's that thing between friends where the other friend isn't jealous that her friend's getting married, is very, like, upset that her friend is... Because Emily, by getting married, is now about to become a completely different person.
Yeah.
Like, her role is to get married and become a housemaker. And you're sort of led to believe that these two maybe haven't had any kind of, like, romantic relationship, I think. But there's definitely very close feelings there. Yes. And once you get married, that's it. Like...
So it was kind of like Charlotte trying to mask her, like, insecurity about her friend getting married.
Well, I feel that Charlotte's, like, digging at Emily a lot during this scene, like, just sort of, like, poking at her, like, trying to upsetting her on purpose, because she's angry, she's mad, like, this is their last hurrah.
Yeah.
Like, she's doing that thing where she's looking out with opera glasses, she's searching for, she says, savages to come and take her away, because the Charlotte still wants, like, the life of the, like, exciting life that women aren't allowed to have anyway. It's the 1880s. Yeah. Back in the 1880s. So yeah, this short story was first published in 1961.
I would check, but my book is under my microphone.
Your book is under a microphone. Yeah, I did give you a book, didn't I?
No, you didn't.
I never got you the book.
I asked, but...
I'm running across the room to find it. Here it is. I'm in the other part of the room now because we're actually in the same room together. We're at my parents' house, by the way.
We're in Texas.
We're in Texas, Spring, Texas. Well, this doesn't give the original publication date. It just says when it was published in the Zanzibar Cat. That was 83, but I think the story was published in, like, 1962. Here, take this, but don't flip the pages too loud. Okay. You know I hate it when that happens.
I know.
Don't flip the pages. My Dear Emily was originally published in... Hold on. I'm finding it. My Dear Emily was originally published in 1962, first appeared in the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, with an ending she's not happy with.
Yep.
And that's the ending we have in The Dark Descent. If you want to read the ending she likes, you have to pick up her short story collection, The Zanzibar Cat.
Yeah, which you can't.
Which you can't. I did find a digital copy of it, though.
You did? Nice.
I did. That's how I was able to read to you the ending.
Oh, okay.
But, so just beware that we will be discussing an alternate version of the story. And if you're reading, excuse me so much, I'm full of pizza. If you're reading The Dark Descent, you will be reading her unapproved text. The one that
the editors wanted her to write.
Right, and
which is bizarre to me.
Because, well, I mean, 1962, the ending she came up with was a little more challenging, I think.
Was it?
Than the readers of fantasy and science fiction were probably ready to...
I mean, even looking back, there's so many ways you can read that.
Right.
I just don't see how it's challenging.
So Joanna Russ loves this story, by the way. She said that her hope one day before she died, which didn't happen, she wanted Hammer Films to adapt this. She thought it'd make a great Hammer movie. And it is. It would make an interesting one of their vampire stories. So, yeah, you've got these two friends, Charlotte and Emily, named, I guess, to suggest the Bronte sisters, on this train heading back to San Francisco. And all of a sudden, it just switches to the perspective of a vampire waking up in the grave.
Yeah.
And it almost, in this, like, the purplest prose. Like, it shifts from a relatively naturalistic, like, exchange between friends to this almost Anne Rice-esque sweat-pounding, like, over-descriptions. Where is it? He wakes up slowly, mistily, dizzily, with a vague memory of having fallen asleep on plush. He is intensely miserable, bound down to his bed with hoops of steel, and the memory adds nausea to his misery, solidifying ticklishly around his bare hands and the back of his neck as he drifts towards wakefulness.
It uses the word spasmodically.
But
Awesome.
But it plays with it. It has a joke in it. After all these paragraphs of describing him, like, finally waking up and coming to and everything, it ends with, "Alive!" he cries in triumph. It is, as usual, his first word of the day. It's just this very funny, like, undercut of the whole scene.
Being a vampire seems like it would be miserable.
Well, I think that's kind of what they're getting at here is... So what happens is Emily's engaged to this guy, Will, but she ends up meeting this guy, Martin Guevara, who she's familiar with already.
Is she?
She talks about him like she knows who he is. She's already familiar. Like he talks familiarly to her, and she's familiar with him. She's also not into Will. She's not into her fiance.
No. And I don't... Okay, well, we'll get to it when we get to it, but I don't understand Charlotte in the story at all.
Well, Emily's like, won't let her fiance hold her hand, won't let him, like, snuggle up with her or anything. She will, however, sleep in the same bed as Charlotte.
Yep.
They share a bedroom at her father's place. Or a bed. They share the bed.
Yep.
But she doesn't like to be around Will. Like, she's just sort of doing it because she has to do it. She has to be a wife. So this guy, Martin Guevara, shows up at this garden party, and she's immediately put off by him, but also won't stop talking to him. Like, he's like, "You want lemonade?" And she's like, "I'm not going to talk to you. I'll talk to Will." "Yes, I'll make him in trouble," says Mr. Guevara, so returning silently with lemonade in a glass cup. "No, thank you." She wants to get away," says Martin Guevara. "I know." And that's when she says, "If I had your trick of walking like a cat," she says, "I could get out of anything."
Well, he had his hand on her wrist. Oh, she dropped it. This whole story got lost in my brain.
Well, because people, like, they don't talk, they're not holding your hand through it. They're talking around everything.
Yeah.
Because that's the way they would talk about it, because you're not there, and so they're allowed to talk about things the way they want to. But yeah, he immediately kind of has her under his spell. He has her by the wrist, but she's like, "I can't move." And he's like, "Try." And she can only move towards him, which is mean.
This guy sucks.
Yeah, he sucks. He is a vampire.
He sucks.
He's a predator. This is not... What's funny is this has the structure of, like, a romantic vampire tale, but it's explicitly, like, predator and prey.
Yeah.
And she becomes aware of that. Like, she is aware of what's happening. In one of the commentaries I was reading, they talk about vampire fiction, and they're like, vampires, by their very nature, you cannot have a romantic relationship with a vampire. Like, by their very nature, it is sexual assault. Like, you are being assaulted. Even if it's not actually sexual, it's...
I wrote an entire essay about this.
Yeah, it is always going to be sexual assault. They are animals. But also, he is not human. And Joanna Russ kind of makes that distinction here. He's not a human being. He's acting like a man. He's acting like masculine. He is play acting masculinity in order to seduce her.
And it's not working.
But he just wants her blood.
Yeah.
And eventually she wants everyone else's blood.
Because she becomes a vampire.
But she's stuck in this world where her only options are to be a woman, to be a wife, or to be an outcast. Like if she doesn't get married to this guy and lives the life she wants to live, she'll be shunned. So it's not like Martin Guevara is giving her the choice to become a vampire, but it's still option 3. Like it's kind of for her no worse than anything else in this life.
Yeah.
And she'll stay beautiful forever.
I mean, again, in this sort of world, who wouldn't choose to become a vampire?
But Charlotte becomes her confidant. Like she tells Charlotte what's going on.
And Charlotte's like,
So in a way, it's a little bit of an inverse of the Mina-Lucy relationship. Because they don't find out what's happening to each other.
No.
Yeah. But yeah, it's very... I kept saying and seeing Mina and Lucy in this from Dracula. It's kind of a retelling of that plot line, just...
If the people had actual personalities.
If people have personalities and Dracula was Spaniard.
And also somehow creepier.
Somehow creepier because he's just a guy.
Yeah.
Like
this guy doesn't turn into a lizard and climb up the side of the building.
Nope, he just shows up in your room.
Which was my favorite part of Dracula, by the way.
And actually, she goes to him at one point because he says, I'm fine with like creeping in people's windows, but that's like going to a brothel. When they come to me, oh my God. He's like, that's great.
Yeah.
That's like I'm in a real relationship. But yeah, she starts confiding in Charlotte, who I think is still a little wrapped up in the fact that Emily is marrying Will for a while to like really take her complaints seriously.
And then, well, until Charlotte or Emily is like, here, look at my neck. And Charlotte's like, what? And pulls her hand away and it's covered in blood.
Right, yeah.
Charlotte's like,
Yeah, we don't get any of the assault scenes.
No.
It cuts away, and the only way we know she's been bitten is they keep talking about her like ruined neck. Like I don't know if you ever read the comic of The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Because Mina Harker is one of the main characters in it, and she's a vampire hunter, and she always wears scarves.
Yeah.
And at one point, one of the, I think Alan Quatermain is like, why do you wear a scarf? And so she takes it off, and her neck is just a massive scar tissue.
Yeah. It always bothers me in vampire fiction or whatever when, like, the main character or whatever comes away, and there's just 2 little, like, puncture wounds. I'm like, what?
Yeah, you see that she's been, like, ravaged by this vampire.
Yeah. Like, they don't have straws in their teeth.
Someone was just talking about that, how they always thought that a vampire must have had like holes in their fangs.
No, the reason blood gets everywhere is because they're drinking it with their mouth.
Right.
Their teeth are just used to tear into the skin.
She actually pulls a cross on Martin Guevara at one point.
And he's like, what is this?
And I think it's funny because it's her baby cross. Like, so it's this little tiny cross and she holds it out to him. And he's like, look, the significance is in the feeling and the faith, not the symbol.
Yeah.
You use that the way you would use a hypodermic needle. Now in your father's hands, because her father's a reverend. Yeah. And it's interesting. It's that whole...
I love that.
Yeah. He's like, you can't... No, it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I love the idea of the belief behind the symbol being what actually harms the vampire.
And he says... how many times have I said, do I sound like the silly boys at Andover? 'Cause that's where she was, at Andover. Emily's eyes are fixed and her throat contracts. He forces her head between her knees. So he like pushes her head, like makes her subservient, shoves her down and says, the way you go on, you'd think I was bad luck. And you without the plentiful lack of brains that characterizes your friends. She'll be somebody's short work, and I think I know whose. Because eventually they both turn Charlotte.
Yeah.
And this is where, so you don't get this seduction. It's like you say, he's aggressive.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me. It's kind of like, I know you don't like this movie. Ow. It just hurt my back. To me, I know you don't like this movie, but to me, it reminds me of The Witch. In the sense that it's a girl who is without options.
Yeah.
Who is pulled into a bad option and gives herself over to it Because what the hell else is she gonna like?
It's that whole thing where like people get involved, like if people without options get involved in something bad, especially when it comes to supernatural stuff, and people are like, well, why didn't they just leave? And I'm like, you would try and leave the devil? Because I don't know if you understand, without any help, like, because you turn to someone from the church and you're like, I've been like doing stuff for the devil, you're dead.
Right.
You're dead, especially back then. But if you just stay with what you're doing, it sucks, but you're not dead.
Well, there's also the thing that we're in the unusual situation where, in her case, in the vampire case, unlike actual sexual assault, by being assaulted by the vampire, you stop being the victim.
Yeah.
You become the perpetrator. Like, you are given the power that they once held over you. Like, that's what happened. Like, in this version of the story, if you get bitten by a vampire, you become the vampire. Like, they don't really go into it, but Charlotte becomes a vampire. She becomes a vampire. And all of a sudden, she has power. Like, the person who made you feel powerless is either going to be Will, who is just going to be your master for the rest of your life, or it's going to be Martin for a couple of evenings, and then you're just as powerful as Martin, who's so pompous that he gets himself killed.
Yeah.
And then you and your bosom friend are free to be vampires together and just kill everybody in the town.
Yeah.
Walk around with blood on your face, which she ends up doing, which is awesome. As the story goes on, she cares less and less about her place in society. She starts going around hatless and unkempt, and she goes into the bad part of town where people don't care what she looks like. And I love that. I love that, like, she can just walk around looking like a undead vampire, and people,
what are they gonna do?
Yeah, people ignore her. They're like, oh, she just looks like a person in town. She goes to a tailor to get the vampire's clothes repaired, and it's this funny exchange between her and the tailor, who knows he's working for this vampire guy. And then at the end, he's like, now I was thinking for pay, and she's like, well, you can just keep thinking about that.
Yep.
You know who you work for. And she just takes the clothes and leaves. And Guevara says, like, all these cheesy vampire things. We are passion. Life is passion. Desire makes life. And you realize that he is just like acting like a vampire.
Yeah.
He's not an Anne Rice vampire. He's a monster who just knows how to talk.
Yeah.
I just find that really cool. Yeah. I said I am a genuine seducer. I flatter myself that I am not an animal. She says, you're a monster. But he thinks he's got her.
Which is weird to me. Like, because he does, but not in, like, a positive way.
Right.
He's like, I have you. And she's like, I mean, yeah, but you don't.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like you. But she does. It's like...
So they leave. So Charlotte goes to her father and to her fiance and tells them everything. And of course, they don't really believe her.
Charlotte's like, are you kidding me right now?
Yeah.
Because she talks to Emily first. And she's like, hey, Emily, you're not looking too great.
Right.
Emily's like, I feel great. And Charlotte's like,
She's like, you're not sleeping. You're not eating. You somehow have the energy to go out all the time, but you look like death. And Emily's like, I'm fine.
Charlotte's like, I think it's time to talk to your dad.
I think it's that vampire who keeps biting you on the neck.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're like, well, we'll look into it. But then she gets left alone in the room with Emily, and then Martin Guevara shows up.
I have to find that again because I was so confused during that scene. It was after that.
There's this great exchange between her and Martin, though.
There's an exchange between her and some other guy, isn't there?
Well, she says to Martin at this point, she's meeting him at like the place where he's been living, and she says, I shall like living forever. And Guevara says, God deliver me from Puritans. She says, what? And he says, you're a lady, you'll swallow me up. And she says, I'll do anything I please, with a glint of teeth. And that's when he's like, okay.
Oh no, what have I done?
Yeah.
There's a scene on page 357 of this one, but where she gets yoinked by a barker,
Right.
and she's like, let me go. First of all, let me go. And she bites him.
She does. She
Slashes his palm with her teeth, which is awesome.
which is a way to do it, I guess. She has completely lost all of her inhibitions at this point.
Well, to be fair, I think most people, if they were yoinked by a random person in the street and then called an angry lady for telling them to let you go, would probably bite the person.
What's funny is this book is not subtle about the way it's like, this is about women in society. This is about our place in society, the struggles with the expectations of women in society. It's not subtle about it at all. But I'd say, for me, Russ's writing is so dynamic that I don't care. Like, I can tell that she's working out stuff as a writer, but I'm also just like, this is fun. Like, it's short, it's fun, it's fast, and I'm just sitting here the whole time hoping that Emily doesn't end up getting killed.
Yeah, me too. Here's where I was confused. Right. Charlotte lets out a little noise in her throat, and then with the smash of a pistol shot, the gaslight shatters and the flame goes out. Who shot the pistol?
Where? I was confused at that too. It's not. Here, show me where it is.
It's on the top of the page.
Charlotte lets out a little noise in her throat, and then, with the smash of a pistol shot, the gaslight shatters and the flame goes out. I don't think it's actually a pistol shot. I think it's supposed to be.
It sounds like a pistol?
Yeah, like the smash of a pistol shot. And yeah, that's when Charlotte and Martin, or Emily and Martin have claimed Charlotte. But Emily's not happy about it.
No.
Because that's her friend.
Yeah. But later on she's happy about it.
Right. Yeah.
I love the Charlotte character in this. Her transition is very reminiscent of Lucy's transition.
Yes.
Like almost like spot on. Like this kind of like not super intelligent. I mean, she's smart. She's capable.
But there is this great moment where Emily returns home after going downtown, and her house is empty, and she waits for her father and her fiance to return, and no one returns, and it's after midnight, no one's returned. And then this veiled woman shows up and says, "Don't go home."
Yeah.
And Emily says, like, "What?" And then stranger says, "In danger." Who? He's in danger. And Emily's like, "Holy crap, this is a vampire."
Yep.
And Emily is like, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Who are you?" And the veiled person reveals that it's Charlotte. And it's this really cool scene. Mm-hmm. Basically what's happened is the cemetery, the crypt where Martin lives or sleeps. Will and the father are there waiting to take him out into the daylight, I guess. Yeah. Which is funny because it seems that so far Emily's not allergic to light.
Yeah.
She was walking around in the daylight and stuff, so I assume that happens later. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they're there to keep Martin in the light, and presumably Emily too. I think their goal is to kill Emily as well, like to put her out of her misery.
Well, does she not walk around during nighttime?
I think she just always walks around.
Huh.
And yeah, then her fiance and her father are holding Martin. Emily begs for his life, but it's too late. Martin gets hit by the light, and then Emily runs to avoid the rising sun.
Yeah.
Now, this is where the differences are.
The first one ends with her screaming after Martin says that he adores her, which is a callback to like them talking about how he could never care about her.
Yeah.
He dies. She screams and runs to her friend Charlotte, but that's where it ends.
Yeah, she's like, "I'm gonna try to find Charlotte. Mm-hmm. She's my friend. She'll let me in."
Then it ends.
Yeah. the original version, the way when she wrote, that was rejected by the editor of Science Fiction magazine, that was published in the Zanzibar Cat, actually ends with her heading to Charlotte's crypt. And Charlotte telling her, like, come in. And Emily's like, we have to go help Martin. And Charlotte's like, he's already dead.
Yeah.
You have to come in and get into this coffin with me. And Emily's like, absolutely not. And Charlotte, like, basically lifts her up by the face and is like, we have to get in the coffin. And she's like, but what about Martin? And Charlotte's like, what about Martin? What about Martin? What about Martin? And they get into the coffin and close the lid just as the sun is coming up. And they live to fight another day.
Yeah.
And you're like, huzzah, nice happy ending for the vampire. I mean, they're going to start killing everybody in town. But
You know what? Who cares?
it's a terrible world anyway. A short story written by a woman who was struggling with her own place in the world. What was expected of her. You know, she tried the housewife thing. She didn't think she was good enough at what she was passionate about. She was denying her feelings, her romantic feelings about women, and sort of poured it all out into this vampire story.
Yeah.
Said by our editor-in-chief, David Hartwell, to be like the best vampire story since Carmilla, I think he says in the intro there. I really liked this. Once I got into it, I really liked it. And then it was over.
I like it. I don't like reading it. I enjoy the concept. I really like this kind of story because it's lesbian vampires. I mean, who wouldn't like that? A lot of people. But it was just in a style that I just couldn't wrap my brain around.
Yeah, a little too dense or
A little,
obtuse.
maybe not dense enough.
Like you either wanted a little bit more or a little bit less.
Yeah, well, I wanted more because I didn't really connect to any of the characters.
Yeah, it goes by super. It's told in I think 18 scenes.
The problem, I think the issue for me was the fact that there were no transitions. Because my brain doesn't, like, it just felt very choppy to me.
I get that. Yeah.
There wasn't enough build up for me to, like, really get into it.
Yeah, you're sort of thrown into each scene, like in the middle of things.
And I'm like, okay, well, she hates him, now she loves him. Like, I don't really understand what's happening here. I want more, is what I want.
And I believe this is still Russ trying to get a handle on her own style.
Yeah.
I mean, she studied under Nabokov. I've read a lot of Nabokov, and I can see hints of where that influence come in. Like, I am only going to tell you what you need to know, because the point isn't what's happening. The point is this other point I'm trying to make. I actually started reading another one of her works because of this, though, just to see like how it compares. And she gets more readable. Okay. I find as she goes on, but apparently the Zanzibar Cat is just, some people just absolutely adore. I think it's one of the best collections of short fiction ever written, like single author works of short fiction. So apparently it's got some really hot stuff in it. But one of the things I was reading about this was talking about how she said in the introduction to Zanzibar Cat, all it says is, her introduction is very short to this story. She says, someday Hammer Films will make a movie out of this story and I will die of bliss. That's literally all she says. And it was suggested in one of the articles I read, they were like, this story has a lot in common with, I think they said Black Sunday, or feeling wise. They said that Mario Bava would have made a good director for this movie back in the day. Yeah. Like just sort of a very austere, but about like these women who are like confined by society. And I was like, yeah, I'd watch a Mario Bava, like extended adaptation of this. Like
the style would have fit super well.
Yeah. That sort of just like, that gothic,
striking actresses,
because it's a very gothic tale.
It is.
Yeah, like it plays around with those tropes.
The only thing it's missing is that the house.
Yeah. The house isn't even
Yeah.
because there's so little detail about it. You only know what's like the room is like.
Yeah.
The bedroom. Yeah, I barely even remember. I know they mention the house, like what it looks like, but it's in San Francisco. It's not even like a castle or anything.
Yeah.
It's just a nice house in San Francisco. Yeah, it's a very American story. It's very much about the expanded West because they're traveling by train through the West. They're looking on the lookout for Native Americans. They went to like there. It's so. It seems like a European Gothic horror story, but then you're like, oh wait, this is the Western United States. Like this is the new frontier as far as like the characters are concerned. So that's another thing to keep in mind. It's an American tale, just like Fievel Goes West.
I don't know what that is.
Fievel,
No.
somewhere
No.
out there. He's a mouse,
I don't care.
and he came to America.
It's not important.
With his family.
It's not important. for
Got
this
lost.
podcast.
Built a robot.
No one cares.
I don't remember why there was a robot.
It's not important.
Yes, Steven Spielberg.
Not important.
It was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid. But that is My Dear Emily.
Yeah.
By Joanna Russ. As far as I can find, there's no adaptations of this. If you want to read it, find yourself a copy of Zanzibar Cat.
Or a copy of The Dark Descent.
Right, but if you want to read the actual ending,
Yeah.
get the Zanzibar Cat. But even with the original ending, it's an interesting story. Joanna Russ, good for her.
Yeah.
Poor lady died.
Just like a lot of people.
Just like a lot of people die. Actually, 100% of people
Yep.
eventually will die. It would make an interesting short film, though, on Cabinet of Curiosities.
It would.
I would, as long as they don't overdo it with like gore or anything.
Yeah.
I would be interested in seeing what a female director does with this, playing around with social mores and stuff.
As long as they didn't cut out the gay.
Oh, I doubt they would cut out the gay.
You'd be surprised.
What's our next story in The Dark Descent? Dun,
Oh,
dun.
Professor Gildea was the incredibly long story.
Oh, that's right. Parrot.
You can go now.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. Sorry, everyone.
Dennis Etchison?
Etchison?
Etchison.
You Can Go Now by Dennis Etchison. I don't think we've covered Dennis Etchison.
We haven't.
Surreal psychological short fiction, it looks like. I'm interested. You've already got me. You sold me at the title. You Can Go Now. And you know what? We can go now.
See you later.
Thank you so much for joining us here on It's Del Toro Time. It's been a long time since we've recorded, and I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, well, it's actually been not nearly as long as our first break because we recorded when I was in Illinois.
That's true. But I thought we were going to just keep pumping them out, but then I did a one-man show.
Yeah.
You helped write it.
Yep.
Then I had to stage it and produce it, and everything just fell by the wayside. So we're back, baby.
We're back.
And we promise, pinky promise, that it won't be as long until the next one. Dennis Etchison. We probably will have a little more time for funny jokes.
Yeah.
Not as many funny jokes in this one.
No.
Don't want to make fun of Joanna Russ.
This is also just a hard story to joke about.
Yeah, it's not funny
No.
at all. Not funny like that hilarious one we read about the stone baby. Do you remember the stone baby?
I do, yes.
I was thinking about her the other day. Stone baby. My mom's house, my parents' house has a few possible stone babies in it. Creepy dolls. Just a clown
The
jar.
story was so upsetting.
It was.
That's what we joked about it.
There's a clown jar in your room, though. Tell us about the clown jar.
I try not to think about the clown jar.
The bottom half of the jar is the bottom half of a clown. The upper half of the jar is the upper half of the clown. And it is facing the wall.
Because we don't want it to face not the wall.
Mm-hmm. Now there's a clown in this room around the side of the television. Oh no, it's up on the shelf. And you see its feet dangling. It's a dangling clown.
I actually can't very well because I'm not wearing my glasses.
There's a terrifying teddy bear lamp behind you.
That is a terrifying teddy bear lamp.
There's ghostly photos on the walls. My parents' house is decorated. I'm actually impressed at how decorated every room in this house is. So, If you're in Spring, Texas, stop on by my parents' house. I won't be here, but they'll take you in and feed you Domino's pizza.
Don't.
But we'll be joining you next time with Dennis Etchison's You Can Go Now. Is there anything we're forgetting?
The outro.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Willow.
And we'll see you when it's Del Toro time.
Bye.